Hi guys, I'm just sharing out what I learned and thought was most important to bring back to CPDLF during the summit's fall regional convening. So the first thing that they really stressed a lot and that they would like us to kind of trickle down to the learners is that we always adopt a growth mindset. We maximize your engagement and produce your best quality work. So these are norms that they were encouraging for us in every single session, as well as hoping that you can go back and make those the norms in your own classrooms in the summit. The first one I went to was supporting foundations needs in projects and concept units. It did have more of a special ed feel to it. So first of all, it was identifying who needs foundations supports. So that would be your English language learners, students with disabilities that are identified by special ed testing or 504s, and then also students that are in MTSS interventions. So this is something that you'll want to make sure that you're paying attention to that MAPS data that is in the summit on the learners tab, because I think we started with tier 2 and tier 3 maybe as being our ones who are receiving more intervention. So those are going to be kids that you want to make sure that you are paying attention to, and just because they're not special ed, they're still likely going to need some supports. The scaffold decision process is basically to know the task at hand, make sure you know the process of what's going to be happening in that project, and then thinking of each learner and thinking of who's going to struggle in what area. If it's an essay, a 5-paragraph essay, who struggles to write 5 sentences. So they're likely going to need a scaffold to help them with that writing process. And then just making sure you know your learners, know their struggles, or at least are in contact with the special ed learning guide, and then you choose the appropriate scaffold. They talked a lot about the Just Right resource, and that would be the resource that puts a learner in their zone of proximal development, known as the sweet spot. So it's the space between where they can do things on their own independently and in the space where they need other people to help them. So kind of at their level of challenge, but not their frustrational level. So the goal is not to reduce the rigor of projects. Instead, it's to add supports to help the learner succeed. Student needs determine the appropriate levels of scaffolds, and teachers adjust and create materials to ensure this just right fit. So there are scaffolds available in the summit, and it's important that we're not assigning those to every single kid. You know, if they're not showing a real need for help in writing or in reading, then we shouldn't be assigning a graphic organizer or writing prompts or things like that. It's all about knowing each kid. Teachers adjust or take away scaffolds once they're no longer needed. So again, this is all evidence-based. Once you are seeing evidence that your learners no longer require these, then you should slowly be starting to pull them back, or adjusting the scaffold that you give and only give like 2 or 3 sentence starters instead of 10. So just making sure the goal is to phase them out so they can do it independently. One of the really cool resources that I saw that they add to every time is the Summit Accessibility Resource Bank. So it's located here, and it will be in the slide in Google Classroom. I definitely recommend adding this to your Google Drive, but this right here, the middle column, would be things that the teacher should do. So these are recommended ways to increase accessibility. So if you have students who are struggling with reading, you can click on this one. It'll take you to teacher moves regarding reading. So teacher, different ways to clarify vocabulary, promote understanding. So, and then it kind of can be a rabbit hole. It links down to, it just keeps kind of looking out. So this one gives you could try changing the size of the text, the contrast between background and text, images, the volume or rate of speech. So these are just all things you can do based on the specific need that your students are presenting. And then if you go back into it, then on this side, it would be strategies for students with reading needs. So there's different text to speech. And a lot of these link out to actual really cool websites. There was a cool, no, I don't know where it is, but yeah, I mean, you could spend hours kind of clicking through here and seeing what all is offered. And normally each one links out to like 5 more things. So definitely bookmark that one. And let me get back in here. The next one I went to was scoring as a tool for equity. And basically it's just trying to make sure that our grades are as accurate as possible. So if you had a history class and these were all their grades, The goal was that you identify learner needs and kind of put them on different tracks for success. So you would have your high flyers and those kids that are going to be getting your spicy resources, and then your ones who are pretty much on track, but then there's those ones that need a lot more supports. And then it's making sure that you give them those differentiated supports that they need. So those kids that might need separate workshops to really meet a goal. When we accurately score, we accurately determine student needs and can provide appropriate supports. So making sure that, I think the biggest thing with accurately scoring was the biases, which I'll get into in a few slides, but just making sure that if we're addressing argumentative claim and history as well as English, that there's not a great discrepancy between how I score something and how Leslie or Patrick or whoever is going to score something, because we want to make sure that they're as calibrated as possible. What I learned the most was about being aware of your biases when you're grading. So one of the biggest biases is grade level expectations. And I actually threw out my grade level scoring sheet for Summit since I came back, because I kept finding myself saying, well, 8th graders should be what, 3 is a passing grade. And the point is, if it's not a 3 work based on the rubric, then they shouldn't have a 3 yet. So maybe they are at a 2 or a 2.5 at the beginning of the year, and that you hope that through your work, by the end of the year, they fall within that grade level band. So making sure we're not paying too much attention to grade level expectations. Shiny or extraneous distractions. This is one where it said a lot about grammar. I tend to be the grammar police, and anytime I'm seeing like a bunch of red lines and telling me that everything's spell check hasn't been used and there's no punctuation, to me, I'm biased because I think that they didn't put forth much effort, but that might not be the case. And I have to remember that I'm not actually grading that at that moment. I'm scoring argumentative claim or whatever. So it's making sure that you are focusing only on the task or the cognitive skill that you're supposed to be looking at. And then perceived effort or intentions and mistaking scoring for grading. So you can't look into it and see what might have been implied, like saying things like, I can see what the student was getting at, points for effort, or I can't give a lower score because it would hurt the student's confidence. You have to grade it for what it is and then just grow from there. So acknowledge your biases and then put them aside. Accurate scores rely on a preponderance of evidence throughout the student work. They made sure to keep reiterating that it's a preponderance of evidence. It's not just single items that you see. Like, so in a 2-page paper, they had a claim that at one point was a 5, but then it kind of doesn't exist the rest of the way throughout. So it has to be something that's reoccurring and that you see often throughout the work in order for it to be the most accurate score. And then another resource that I found very helpful was the Principles of Scoring Student Work, which will also be linked. And then basically, I recommend taking the time to do it. It's just 9 things that can help you remember, things to keep in mind as you are grading the work in the Summit. And I think that's it.